Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
We are joined here on RealAgriculture.com now by Dr. Nancy Ames, a research scientist here at the Richardson Centre for Functional Foods and Nutraceuticals in Winnipeg. You are with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and talking about wheat. Of course, we've seen the whole gluten-free move and the establishment of gluten-free aisles in most grocery stores, and I don't know if it's a trend. I'm not sure if we can just call it a trend anymore. But as a wheat industry in Western Canada, or even across Canada, should we be concerned that wheat hasn't gotten a fair shake health-wise, nutrition-wise, over the last few years?
Yeah, I think some negative press in some diet books and people concerned about carbohydrates, or some books coming out suggesting that wheat had some negative health attributes, has had some effect on the wheat industry. I think a lot of people ask me and others in the wheat industry, is this really true about wheat? Is a lot of the general public seems aware of some of these books and negative press and have concerns over it, and I think people in general are concerned about their health. They're concerned about what they eat. It seems like it's, no matter what we're talking about, wheat or something else. So I think some of this press has been somewhat detrimental to wheat in a way that people aren't aware of how good wheat is. I think they're quite, they expect that their bread that they buy every week is a staple food, and maybe they're not thinking and haven't been thinking that wheat is actually a really healthful part of their daily diet. And when these books come out, or when people suddenly are concerned over carbohydrates, wheat is getting a little bit of a negative play on, without people being aware fully of what the value of wheat is to our daily nutrition.
One of the claims that's been made is that wheat has changed over the years, that it's less nutritional than it used to be. You've done some pretty extensive research looking at going back to the early varieties of wheat grown here in Canada.
Yeah, we've had a study. One of the reasons we started the study was really to look at that question, because we had seen this in some popular media that suggested, oh, gee, we've changed wheat over the last 50 years. There's actually been, some correlations that have been made between the fact that in the last 50 years people have gained weight, and in the last 50 years, we've bred new wheat varieties. Well, yeah, and we've done a lot of other things too in the last 50 years. A lot of things could be correlated to increase in obesity or waist size, lots of things. And we know it's a problem in our society. We've got a problem with obesity. Whether it is wheat that can be blamed for it or wheat breeding, I doubt. So we undertook this study to say, what have we done? Let's take a good look at summarizing the things we've done. And I think one of the things that is missed by the popular press and by consumers and by maybe a lot of people is how many great things we've done, how much we have changed wheat. We've increased the yield, because that was important, and we've reduced disease. We've increased disease resistance through breeding, and we've also maintained an incredible quality for bread making, for milling, for baking. For other products that are made from wheat traditionally, we've maintained that quality because we knew that what quality we had 100 years ago was pretty good. How do we always make sure that all our wheat varieties, when they're going to be registered in Canada, they have to be equal or better than the previous varieties. And so this is something we've looked at pretty thoroughly. We've kept a really close watch on this. And I think it's really with great thanks to the wheat industry that we have to say, good job what you've done. So our project was to take a look at what have we changed, how can we summarize this, what have we changed agronomically, what have we changed functionally in terms of bread making quality, what have we changed in terms of nutrition. And so we decided to take a look at varieties that were grown all the way, over 100 years ago, back to red fife wheat, one of our first varieties on the prairies, Marquis wheat. Some of the early varieties all the way to the modern day varieties that are being grown, commonly today in the prairie provinces. So we looked at all of them grown over several locations and years and evaluated them. We've been evaluating wheat. We evaluate wheat for registration purposes and for breeding purposes all the time. But we looked at these specifically under a comparison perspective.
And what did you find?
Well, what we found was really in terms of the nutritional properties, we looked at some of the components that we consider to be important: protein and fat and starch and carbohydrates in general, fiber. We looked at some specific antioxidant characteristics, phenolic compounds. Those we thought might have changed because they're very important in disease resistance of the plant, and we thought that might have altered. What we really found was, surprisingly little change. Surprisingly little. And that is also true of the bread making characteristics. There was some small increases in strength of gluten, the protein that is important in creating the type of functional characteristics of wheat that allow us to make products like pasta with that al dente texture that's so liked by especially the Italians, and to make bread that has a very great low volume and great crumb structure. All of those things are part of what makes wheat so good for those products, and it has a lot to do with the gluten. And we hadn't changed very much of that. There's been some slight changes in the strength and extensibility of that gluten. We've seen that. And a lot of those changes, though, are really also affected by environment. We see a genotype by environment effect. So sometimes environment is just as important as what we've done through breeding. So surprisingly little has changed. We had phenolic compounds and antioxidants 100 years ago. We still have them. They change a little bit depending on where you grow something. They change a little bit depending on the type of year you have. But one of the things I would say that I've seen the most in some of these, what I would call bioactive compounds that are important for health, is that they're more, probably these days our varieties are just a little more stable. You can grow them in different locations and still get what you thought you were going to get. So we've made them more stable, and that's important for our industry so that we can be more sure what we're, that no matter where a farmer grows something, when it's going to end up in another country, that it's probably going to have that same quality characteristic.
Mm-hmm. So this is really a good news story about wheat and the nutritional profile of wheat?
Yeah, I think it is. Now, this study is still in, it's not completed. We haven't completed the paper, and we haven't completed all the statistics. So it's really, we still are looking at the samples that we grew last year. So it's not completely over. I want to emphasize that. And I think there's, so we still need, we're not absolutely sure of every detail of the statistics. So we're hoping to publish that. And that's a joint study with myself, Ron DePau, a wheat breeder at Swift Current Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and Nancy Edwards, who was from the Grain Commission, are all part of this project, and we'll all publish this together. But there's other aspects of this that I think we need to go forward on. One of the things we've learned is people's interest in these heritage wheats. People are very interested in things that are old, but they want wheats like red fife wheat. It just seems to have some sort of romanticism or something, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're good wheats. They probably don't have some of the agronomics that, well, they don't. Obviously we haven't bred these wheats for 100 years to not make some progress, and we need to continue to make progress. We need to make progress in yield. We need to consider that products are changing. People don't always want exactly the same type of products through the years. They change. When a few years ago people never ate whole grain breads, now they want whole grain breads. So we're needing to make take a look at quality characteristics in wheat that's ground to be used in whole grain products. We need to take a look at that and see if there's some varieties that are more suitable than others. Are there genetic characteristics we can measure that are more suitable for those products. We need to look at, there's lots of health benefits of wheat that haven't really been capitalized on, just because, it hasn't been important to consumers. Really, a lot of breeding is about consumers. You don't breed new varieties not to be looking at what the consumer wants. That's why you do it. And so I think if consumers say they want a product that has more nutrition, that perhaps capitalizes on a particular type of fiber, or has more fiber, or has a particular type of nutrient, these are things, there's lots of those things in wheat that we really haven't gone out and said, let's breed for these. We need to find markets for things before breeders can put a lot of emphasis, because it takes 10 years to breed a new variety. Everyone knows that, and it's not something that you just participate in without potential market for it.